After 39 years of what I believed to be a loving marriage, I faced a devastating revelation last month. My wife had been unfaithful for the past 6 years. This betrayal unfolded through multiple affairs, with the one most frequently mentioned being with a young immigrant she met during her numerous trips to France. At 63 years old, I had always trusted her completely. She is 61, and both of us share a rich heritage, having grown up in the picturesque south of France. Though our roots are in France, we have settled in California, where I thought we had built a life filled with love and camaraderie. Our marriage, which had been long and filled with joy, laughter, and mutual respect, took a sudden and painful turn when I accidentally discovered a collection of intimate videos that they had created together. That moment shattered everything I thought I knew about our relationship. I have an appointment with an attorney later today, a necessary step in navigating the fallout from this betrayal. To understand the depth of this betrayal, it is important to reflect on our journey together. We first met in 1977 when I was just 21 years old. Our paths crossed at a summer camp in Northern California, where she had traveled with her family. I had been living with my uncle in the area for 2 years, enjoying the beach with my French-speaking friends when I noticed her presence. Striking up a conversation led to an immediate connection. We both hailed from the same small town situated between Nice and Cannes, which was a delightful surprise. I had the chance to meet her family, including her siblings, and soon became her summer boyfriend. Over the following months, our relationship blossomed despite the distance when she returned to France. A few months later, she came back to the United States, and I took a trip to visit her in France. Our first intimate moment was on a beautiful beach in Corsica in 1978. By 1981, our love story culminated in marriage, and in 1984, we made the pivotal move to the Los Angeles area. Our lives blossomed, and a few years later, we welcomed a son who is now 29 years old. By 1997, we settled in Southern California, where we enjoyed a fulfilling life together. In the years that followed, my wife managed a travel agency, a venture that not only sustained us but also allowed us to explore the world extensively. Traveling became a major part of our lives, especially after my retirement. We were fortunate enough to experience first-class flights and exotic destinations as a couple, relishing the freedom that her profession provided. Her frequent trips between Los Angeles and Venice became a norm, and I never once doubted her motives, always believing her reason for travel to be work-related. During my retirement, I accompanied her on some of those trips, but I always felt secure knowing she was never too far away. My wife's dedication to her business intensified after the pandemic hit, as it severely impacted her operations. She genuinely loved the Venice area and the lifestyle she had built there, maintaining strong ties to her French roots. She worked for several airlines before establishing her travel agency 25 years ago, allowing us to immerse ourselves in both cultures. Throughout our marriage, we experienced fluctuations in intimacy, especially in recent years due to my battle with prostate and bladder cancer. As my health took priority, our intimacy naturally decreased, but we had previously enjoyed an active sex life, averaging 3 to 4 times a week. My wife's physical transformation in her 40s was remarkable. She committed herself to fitness by running, hiking, engaging in yoga, and adhering to a healthy diet. By her mid-50s, she was practically radiant, in excellent shape, and felt invigorated. While I once joined her in hiking adventures, my own physical limitations, including 2 bad knees, prevented me from keeping up with her vigorous activities. She always had boundless energy and consistently excelled in her profession, earning several awards for her hard work and dedication. Just last year, on December 27th, she returned from France after spending Christmas with her family. I had looked forward to her return, even preparing a romantic dinner date to mark the occasion, convinced that her radiant smile was simply a reflection of joyous travel. During dinner, she excitedly recounted all the new places she had explored in France, discussing romantic destinations we had once planned to visit together. Little did I know that behind her captivating stories lay the painful truth of her betrayal that would unravel everything I thought we shared. We used to share our deepest truths, revealing our innermost secrets to one another, but now the dynamic had shifted dramatically. She had transitioned into a person who guarded her secrets closely, presenting a facade of happiness and a carefree attitude, while I felt my own essence slowly fading away. The 2 battles with cancer I had faced loomed large in my mind, as both types had a high risk of returning. This knowledge created a constant awareness that I was living on borrowed time. Yet, isn't that the reality we all face? Life is fleeting, and every moment is precious. Reflecting on my own life, I recognized that I had lived a fortunate and fulfilling existence, especially considering the early deaths that plagued the men in my family. My father had passed at 62, my brother at 60, and my grandfather at just 57. As I approached my 64th birthday next month, I felt a sense of gratitude for the life I had led. However, when the inevitable end would arrive, it was the thought of having her by my side that offered me comfort. Yet, the woman I once knew seemed to have disappeared, her essence was no longer visible to me. In my search for clarity, I turned to various resources, hoping to find help, but the traditional methods for uncovering a cheating spouse didn't seem applicable given the international dimension of her affair. I couldn't simply hire a private investigator to watch her movements or set up a voice recorder before her trip to Martinique for New Year's Eve. One night, I overheard part of a phone conversation while she was in the bathroom, believing I was asleep. I typically sleep very deeply, but the snippets of her conversation pierced through the fog. The way she altered her language suggested she was conversing with someone who was not a native French speaker. Her expressions of love and her eagerness to be with this person confirmed my worst suspicions. I felt an overwhelming wave of devastation wash over me when she mentioned sending him photos and videos. In the aftermath of this realization, I found myself consumed by thoughts of investigating her emails or phone in a desperate attempt to uncover the identity of this man or the full extent of her betrayal. The following morning, she woke up early, prepared breakfast, and I drove her to the airport. After dropping her off, a heavy sense of dread settled in as I made my way back home, plotting ways to access her email and find any evidence of her infidelity. I knew her old email address, and because we had always shared our email accounts openly, I held on to the hope that she hadn't changed it. Additionally, I planned to scrutinize our shared bank account to track her spending habits. Upon returning home, I logged into her email, and to my surprise, I was able to access it using her password. I began sifting through her emails with a sense of urgency, and that's when I stumbled upon plane tickets for her and a man named Cedric. The name felt foreign to me, and my gut instinct told me he might be Algerian. As I continued to examine the emails, I discovered that she had been purchasing tickets for him for over 2 years, using funds from our joint account to finance her rendezvous with this man. I felt as though I was unraveling a web of deception. I hoped to find photographs of them together, but my search through her emails came up empty. Knowing my wife's penchant for capturing memories during her travels, I recalled that she had previously used a portable hard drive for her photos before switching to cloud storage when it became popular. I remembered setting up her Dropbox account years ago, which automatically uploaded her photos and videos whenever she was connected to Wi-Fi. My next step was to search for the Dropbox link in her email, and fortunately, I found it. I clicked on the link and was relieved to discover that her Dropbox account was linked to the same email and password as her Yahoo account. Logging in, I was confronted by a treasure trove of photos and videos featuring her and her affair partner. Each image revealed aspects of her life that had remained hidden from me, places she had traveled, people she had encountered. It felt like peering into a timeline that spanned over 5 years, chronicling experiences I had never been a part of. Among the thumbnails, one video caught my eye. It displayed my wife in an unclothed state, and as I clicked to watch, I was immediately struck by a wave of emotion. There she was, intimate with a much younger Algerian man. Her laughter, the giggles shared between them, the affection she lavished on him, it was all so reminiscent of the love she had once shown me. When she glanced at the camera as he recorded her, it was the same way she used to look at me, filled with warmth and love. The pain was indescribable. I stepped outside briefly, seeking fresh air as the weight of the moment bore down on me. Once I collected myself, I returned inside to continue watching the videos, each revealing more and more of a life I had thought was shared with just me. In the midst of my exploration, I stumbled across an array of videos that presented a startling insight into my wife's personality, particularly her assertive behavior during intimate moments. Throughout our 39 years of marriage, I had no inkling that she possessed such preferences and desires. It was as though I had been living in a bubble, unaware of the depths of her character and the complexities of her interests. The videos I discovered were dated, with some stretching back over a year, while others were more recent, correlating with her last trip. What took me by surprise was the revelation that my wife had a penchant for recording intimate moments, indulging in adult films, and visiting adult stores. Approximately 8 years prior, as she began focusing on her fitness and well-being, she gained a newfound confidence that inspired her to document our more private experiences. Initially, she encouraged my participation in these recordings, but I eventually pulled back. It dawned on me that I was engaging in it primarily for her satisfaction, lacking the same enthusiasm she possessed. Over time, her interest in these activities diminished, and I erroneously assumed it had simply been a fleeting phase. Little did I know that this inclination was deeply embedded in her, and she had since shifted her attention to someone else. The initial shock was just the beginning of my revelations. I spent that entire day sifting through her Dropbox, unearthing photos and videos that painted a profoundly different picture of our marriage. Among them was a particular image that stopped me in my tracks, a picture of her being intimate with her ex-boyfriend, the man she had been with before me. He had transitioned into a psychiatrist and had a family of his own, complete with grandchildren. Coincidentally, he hailed from the same area as my wife and me, and their paths had crossed during her visits to her mother's house. She had always referred to him as just a friend, but I was oblivious to the fact that they had sustained a close relationship this entire time. In that moment of discovery, the sense of betrayal was overwhelming. It dawned on me that perhaps during her trips to France, she had been carrying on an affair with him throughout our marriage. He was still married to his own wife and was a respected figure in his community. What was even more unsettling was the realization that she had meticulously kept a record of their encounters, almost as if she had been waiting for the day I would find out. While I did not come across any explicit videos of her with him, the intimate photographs and documentation of their trips together suggested a life that I had not been a part of. It became clear that my wife had been living a double, or maybe even triple, life, shifting between her two affair partners. From what I pieced together, she had been involved with an Algerian immigrant exclusively for the past 2 years. The entire day morphed into a nostalgic reflection as I grappled with the reality of my life. It felt increasingly evident that she may have never fully committed to our relationship at any point during our marriage. Regardless of how much trust one had placed in her, never once questioning her fidelity, the foundation of our seemingly happy life together crumbled before my eyes. Our lengthy marriage was filled with joy, laughter, and mutual admiration. I had fought 2 battles with cancer, once in 2008 and again in 2013. During those challenging times, she was my rock, offering unwavering support both before and after my surgeries. I was fortunate enough to experience no major side effects from the robotic Da Vinci surgery, and life resumed to some semblance of normalcy just 3 weeks after, rekindling our intimate connection. Until about 2 years ago, she was the epitome of a devoted spouse, but then gradually, things changed. I noticed that we began spending less time together. She frequently traveled to visit her ailing mother and made various excuses for her trips abroad. As I processed the gravity of my discoveries, it felt as though my entire world was on the brink of transformation. After dedicating a significant portion of my life to her, just as I approached retirement with dreams of globetrotting together, she had initiated an affair. The most painful realization was that while I was sifting through the evidence of her betrayal, she was on her way to meet her affair partner the very next day. Sleep eluded me that night, and I wrestled with the thought of potentially moving on with my life, perhaps relocating to South America or an Asian country in search of a younger partner, convinced that my wife had already done the same. Later that same day, my wife called to check on me. When I saw her name flashing on my caller ID, my instinct screamed at me to confront her immediately. Yet, I knew that such a crucial conversation warranted a face-to-face dialogue. I needed to look her in the eyes and witness her attempts to deceive me about her affair. With only 3 days remaining on her trip, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. I can still recall our phone conversation the day before her return, knowing that my life, and our marriage, was about to irrevocably change. Before her return from the trip, she made a deliberate choice not to mention the affair, yet I could sense that something was amiss. My instinct told me that her demeanor and the way she spoke indicated that she was aware I had picked up on something, likely due to my unusual responses to her texts and calls. In anticipation of her return, I took the step to reach out to a lawyer, aiming to explore my options and understand the implications of the situation unfolding before me. When she landed that morning, I deviated from my usual routine of picking her up. Instead, I told her I was busy with work and suggested she take a cab, a suggestion that she found odd. Normally, my schedule would have allowed me to be there for her. I always made it a point to be present, especially after a long trip. As she entered our home, I was prepared. I confronted her with all the evidence I had meticulously gathered during her absence. I showed her videos depicting her in intimate moments with the young Algerian man, along with photographs that captured her affectionate gestures with her ex-boyfriend. The evidence I presented was so compelling that there was no way for her to deny it. To my astonishment, it became evident that she had been involved in these affairs for such an extended period that she seemed to have normalized her behavior, failing to recognize the gravity of her actions. She expressed a belief that we could simply move past this, asserting that she didn't want to rush into any decisions. However, she was clear that she had not yet decided to formally end her involvement with the Algerian man. She casually referred to her affair with the doctor as a fleeting encounter, claiming they hadn't seen each other in a while, yet I found it hard to accept that any of this had not been a significant breach of trust. I pressed her on how she could maintain such a facade, especially when our relationship had been built on what I now understood to be lies. I pointed out her glaring lack of remorse, which shocked me. Her excuse for her actions was that she thought I might also be having an affair, a claim she knew was entirely unfounded. In a twisted turn of logic, she even suggested that I could pursue an affair if I wanted, all while wanting to remain married to me. I made it clear that divorce was now an unavoidable outcome in my view. As we continued to discuss our options, she expressed her reluctance to return to her life in Southern California. Initially, I didn't fully grasp her meaning, perhaps I was in denial. However, when she reiterated her feelings about the 25th of the month while still present, it became clear that she was referring to the prospect of living with me in a way that felt untenable given the circumstances. In a fit of rage, I threw all her belongings from our bedroom balcony down to the parking lot below. The look on her face shifted from confusion to shock, making it evident that I was serious about pursuing a divorce. She soon moved into our son's condo next door, a transition that occurred last Monday. Since that time, we have had numerous discussions about our relationship, but we both acknowledged that divorce was the only way forward. We consulted with an attorney mediator that Thursday and began the necessary paperwork. During these tumultuous days, I found myself contemplating whether to report her affair partner, the doctor, to the relevant medical board. In my view, a psychiatrist holds an ethical obligation to every individual they encounter, regardless of their status as a patient. He had to have known that by engaging in an affair with a married woman, he would cause pain and suffering to me, her husband. 50 years ago, her ex-boyfriend was a part of my brother's social circle, and I recognized him, although he didn't seem to remember me. He is roughly 3 to 4 years older, putting him at around 67 years old. I felt that he willingly engaged in actions that caused harm to others, and as a psychiatrist, he should have utilized his skills to uplift, rather than manipulate and seduce. After some investigation, I discovered that her relationship with her ex-boyfriend had actually begun back in 2015. The three of us shared the same small town of Venice, nestled between Nice and Cannes. She had consistently told me that she was looking after her elderly mother, claiming that her sister wasn't doing enough to help. It turns out her ex-boyfriend was her first love. In March of 2015, her sister ran into him at a pharmacy and informed him that my wife was back in town. He provided his phone number to her sister, who then passed it along to my wife. This set off their initial contact after 37 years apart, leading to dinner dates and rekindled intimacy. While the south of France is undoubtedly a beautiful locale, I have always preferred Southern California, where we have made our home since 1997. We own a lovely house with a view of the ocean, a place filled with memories that now feel tainted by betrayal and heartbreak. Golf has become a major source of enjoyment for me, allowing me to play year-round at a cost that is quite reasonable, especially in comparison to the high prices of golf in France. This newfound freedom came after I asked my wife to leave our home, a decision that led her to move in with my son. Since then, she has shown no desire to return, and it's apparent that she feels no remorse for the pain her actions have caused in our lives. Her demeanor suggests an inclination to regard herself as a character akin to Francesca from The Bridges of Madison County, acting impulsively and perhaps experiencing a sort of reckless final act in our relationship. Recently, my wife and I consulted with a lawyer mediator, which proved to be a discouraging experience for me. Both of us worked hard during our marriage, particularly my wife, who managed our finances with diligence. Despite her financial stability, with a debt-free condominium in France, the conversation with the mediator did not yield the clarity I had hoped for. I attempted to extract more information about her actions and infidelity, but her responses were vague and lacked the detail I sought. This was particularly frustrating since I had already pieced together a timeline based on the evidence I had gathered, which included Dropbox photos, plane tickets, and credit card statements. Regarding the young Algerian immigrant she is involved with, she continues to refuse to share how they initially met. The evidence I have uncovered suggests that their relationship resembles a typical sugar mommy and sugar baby dynamic. While she may believe that he loves her, from my perspective, it appears he is primarily interested in her for physical intimacy and financial support, utilizing her resources, and by extension mine. She mentioned they first met around October 23, 2019, and I suspect that their affair escalated soon after that date, particularly towards the end of October, as indicated by the activity I observed on Dropbox. There are also several past events that have resurfaced in my mind, making me question whether they were merely coincidences or part of a larger, more calculated plan. I previously recounted our trip to Martinique for New Year's Eve, but before that, during a visit to Ireland with a friend who had mobility issues, I watched as my wife hiked ahead of us on the Giant's Causeway, appearing to enjoy the trek. At the time, I thought she was merely eager to explore, but now I wonder if those moments were used to spend time on her phone, perhaps communicating with someone else. Just a few days later, while at Strandhill Beach, she made a surprising announcement about her extended stay in France from October to December 20th, claiming that her sister insisted on it. This duration felt unusually long to me, and I began to suspect that she may have orchestrated this plan herself, hiding behind her sister's request. The arrival of the pandemic provided her with an opportune excuse to delay her return. I didn't see her until May. During this entire time, she used her mother's health as a convenient cover while engaging in her romantic relationship with the young immigrant. When I confronted her about whether she had been intimate with both him and a doctor simultaneously, she admitted to being mainly involved with the immigrant since they met. Although she has not openly declared love for him, she described him as very interesting, which feels like a thinly veiled admission of her feelings. She offered the classic line about loving but not being in love with someone, which does little to assuage my hurt. Moreover, she insists that she does not want a divorce, even going so far as to say that I am free to have an affair if I wish. This comes as a bitter irony, given that she has engaged in an affair since 2015 without informing me, all while treating our marriage as if it were merely an accessory, akin to one of her handbag collections. Historically, I can't recall any significant issues in our marriage. Even when our intimacy diminished, I attributed that to my battle with cancer. We rarely argued, and I can't remember ever resorting to name-calling. Everything changed in a way that left me completely unaware of the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. In a recent update with the attorney, I learned about the legal implications of her inheritance. Since it was a gift from her mother, I do not have any claim to that property. Similarly, she has no right to the inheritance I secured in our living trust when my mother passed away in 2016. However, as I receive a pension from the city, she is entitled to half of that. Her business, which had been thriving before the pandemic, took a significant hit afterward, complicating matters further. The potential implications of my current situation could grant me a claim to 50% of my spouse's 50% share in her business. However, considering the present unstable condition of her business, which is struggling significantly in the travel industry, the reality is that it equates to virtually 25% of any perceived value. Recently, new information surfaced that might complicate matters further. My spouse received a troubling call last night from the caregiver of her mother, informing her that both her sister and her sister's husband, along with her mother, have tested positive for COVID-19. This unforeseen development raises questions about how these personal circumstances may impact our ongoing divorce proceedings, particularly in relation to my pension, which is part of a Los Angeles City pension system. The division of the pension is governed by a regulation known as the Brown Act. This law establishes that in the case of divorce, the allocation is predetermined, and given my specific circumstances, having been married prior to launching my career and retiring while married, my spouse is entitled to precisely 50% of my pension, with no possibility for negotiation. As it stands, her business currently lacks any tangible value. She has expressed her intentions to work diligently to restore it and eventually plans to sell her stake to her business partner. In light of her previous actions and attitudes, I've been contemplating the idea of hiring a private attorney to represent my interests. My spouse has shown a persistent desire to avoid returning to her prior lifestyle, expressing her happiness with her life in France. It appears this may correlate with her engagement in several extramarital relationships while still legally married to me. Despite her intentions to carry on with her life as it was, secretly involved with a younger man and her former boyfriend, I have been clear in stating that such behavior is unacceptable. I reached out to the pension department to clarify my entitlements, and they confirmed my understanding of the 50% claim. Moreover, there were additional inconsistencies in what my spouse communicated. She asserted that, following a meeting with her business partner, they had enough financial resources to continue sustaining themselves without drawing a salary for another 6 months, much like they had during previous economic downturns in 2001 and 2008. She claimed this would enable her to focus on reviving the agency, with a plan to eventually sell her share if the economy improves in 2021 and then share the profits with me. However, I felt a wave of doubt wash over me during a recent biking session, given the 6 years of dishonesty I have experienced in our relationship. I decided to take the proactive step of contacting her business partner directly. To my surprise, he informed me that they had never even broached the topic of a buyout. At the age of 73, he expressed no interest in acquiring her 50% share of the business. In terms of financial matters, it appears there is some progress. The individual account statements, IAS, are in her favor, totaling approximately $130,000. She intends to give me half of that amount, $65,000, to ensure our financial interests are balanced since both accounts consist of the same mutual funds. The real challenge lies with the house we co-own, which is placed in a trust. We need to establish a clear agreement for what happens if either of us considers selling it. This issue was brought up by her, but I found myself at a loss for a response, just as I do now. Perhaps the attorney will offer some valuable insights as this situation is likely not unique. It's notable that she will not be filing any tax documentation in France, and her last income here was in July. We will be submitting our taxes jointly for the year 2020, and I have no intentions of returning to France. I've already sent a text to the attorney to address my pension queries, but I'm still awaiting a response. The remaining issues seem relatively straightforward to resolve equitably. As she departs today and won't be back until March, we will need to schedule further meetings with the attorney during her absence. In the meantime, I have started preparing the necessary paperwork. Our 29-year-old son, who lives nearby, has offered his support. He has chosen not to judge his mother and tends to keep to himself, making communication challenging between us. He assured me that he is there to listen, though I'm uncertain about what he truly thinks. I haven't pressed him for his opinion on the situation, but he became aware of the circumstances when I took steps to remove her belongings from our home. Concerning my feelings about her relationships, I have chosen not to take any action against her ex or the younger man involved. While I do harbor feelings of anger towards the doctor, believing he acted unethically as a mental health professional during a critical time for our marriage, I recognize that legally, I have no basis for pursuing any claims against him. With that said, I've decided it's best to let go of those thoughts and move forward. The actual value of the company will ultimately hinge on what can be salvaged come spring. If she chooses not to remain involved, it is likely that only her business partner would express any interest in acquiring her shares. She has always been the powerhouse behind this company, its driving force and its most significant asset. Aside from the dedication and expertise of the employees who manage client inquiries, there are no substantial physical assets to consider. Her performance in sales consistently surpasses that of the next highest performing salesperson by a staggering margin, often by several $million. Just last week, her business partner indicated that he is unwilling to buy her out, which complicates the situation considerably. If an agreement can be reached that ensures everything is divided fairly, including a portion of my pension, I would be willing to accept that outcome. In a recent update, she returned to France due to her 89-year-old mother testing positive for COVID-19 and subsequently not doing well. Currently, her mother is receiving care at home. In the meantime, wayward wife sent me a text confirming that she will not claim more than 30% of my pension. We are also preparing to move forward with the divorce paperwork through our attorney as soon as she returns on March 16th. During a drive to LAX recently, I asked her what was on her mind when she mentioned her reluctance to pursue a divorce, and I agreed to remain composed and avoid creating tension until she is fully committed to the arrangement regarding the pension. The situation at the company has grown more precarious. It has been reduced to just 4 or 5 employees, after many, including our son, were laid off. They are not conducting any business activities at present. Last year, the company grossed over $7 million, while in 2018, the revenue was approximately $6 million. She received significant bonuses through her 401k plans, which she rolled over into her IRA, hence the larger balance in her retirement account when compared to mine. However, there seems to be an understanding that all assets will be balanced out fairly. I am entitled to 25% of her share, equating to $65,000 from her employment, but I do not harbor any unrealistic expectations. If her business partner continues to show no interest in buying her out, that 25% may ultimately hold no value. We have mutually agreed that she will not take more than 30% of my pension, and we are also settling on an equal division of our other shared assets, including the house. However, I wish to introduce a clause stipulating that if she remarries, whether to a younger man or her ex-husband, she would forfeit her claim to that 30%. It seems reasonable to me that I should not be financially responsible for her future partner's expenses. Although she often states that remarriage is an unlikely prospect, calling the idea laughable and asserting that there is no need for such a commitment, there remains a concern that her situation could change. After consulting with my employer's pension department, I've learned that the percentage of the pension she will receive is hers indefinitely. This means that even if she were to marry any of her previous partners, she would still retain that percentage, and I would be contributing to the lifestyle of someone else entirely. It does not matter that her former boyfriend is a neuropsychiatrist likely earning a significantly higher salary than my pension, or that her current partner is financially dependent on her. If my attorney advises me to agree to her receiving less than half, I see no reason to hesitate. I stand to lose no more than what I originally anticipated. I have a Zoom meeting scheduled for next Friday with an attorney specializing in cases like mine. The driving force behind my pursuit of a divorce is the desire to start anew. Although the process is painful at this time, I believe it is essential for my future. At 64, I suspect that no thoughtful woman would consider a long-term relationship with a man who is merely separated. Yet, I am still hopeful that there might be someone out there interested in sharing the next 10 to 15 years with me. Throughout our time together, I have not seen any evidence of her hiding money. I managed her paychecks, monitored W-2 forms, and handled tax payments each April 15th. Additionally, when they were contemplating closing the company, I transferred her 401k funds into her IRA in July. Her affair appeared to be primarily physical, devoid of any financial stakes. Though she deceived me, we did not face any monetary disputes during our marriage. I still have a significant stake in her 50% ownership, and I am absolutely committed to retaining my 25% share in California. Currently, there seems to be a legal stipulation that could require her to receive 50% as the spouse of a pensioner like myself, although I am not entirely sure how that will play out. She may be inclined to agree to a 30% share, but I suspect she finds it difficult to accept anything less than 50%. On my part, I refuse to accept anything below 50% and could potentially end up with as much as 70%. I anticipate getting more clarity on this situation next Friday when I consult with an attorney who specializes in family law and divorce cases for individuals in similar professions as mine. As for other assets, we have agreed to split them equally. I'm currently dealing with a lot of emotional pain, yet I feel that I am starting to stabilize compared to where I was last month and even the month before. Since January 1st, I have maintained my sobriety, which is a significant milestone for me. In the past, a bottle of Jameson, combined with a six-pack and several bottles of wine, would only last me 4 days, so the fact that I no longer crave alcohol is something I'm genuinely proud of. Although I will not rush into any decisions, I don't foresee any substantial obstacles to achieving a fair settlement, apart from the pension situation. I distributed the assets in our living trust in a way that was fair. As per our agreement, she will keep her IRAs while I retain mine. We accounted for the $130,000 difference during the division of the trust. My attorney has prepared the petition for me to sign, and it appears there are no complications regarding splitting the pension in a 70-30 ratio. We will serve her attorney since she is currently in France. In the meantime, I've started the arduous task of packing and emptying the house, which is proving to be quite a challenging experience. I am planning to relocate to the Las Vegas area, and she is expected to arrive on March 16th. If all goes as planned, I might be moved out by then. It's frustrating, though, as she has yet to acknowledge the pain she caused and shows no signs of remorse. Back in December and early January, I sought answers and tried to understand her actions, but she ignored my inquiries completely. There are moments when I still find it hard to wrap my head around the entire situation. The affair, the deceit that lasted nearly 6 years is almost unfathomable, especially coming from someone I trusted implicitly. The sadness lingers, and I have not yet fully moved past it. When it comes to the house and her business, my initial instinct after her admission of the affair on November 3rd was to sell the house immediately. However, I later reconsidered and thought it would be best to hold on to it for as long as possible. Ultimately, though, I recognize that living in the house where we spent 23 years together, years I remember as happy, at least from my perspective, would be nearly impossible if I wanted to move forward. Therefore, we have agreed to sell it. She mentioned I should do whatever I deem best for myself, and given that we have no major debts and are both in our 60s, the decision seems practical. She appears to have convinced herself that her affair was some kind of beautiful love story rather than the sordid betrayal it truly was, despite lying to me for almost 6 years. I sense her detachment from the reality of the situation, although that doesn't mean I accept it. Reflecting on our past makes it painful to revisit old photos and memories of the countless places we visited together during my extensive 25-year career in the travel industry. We explored so many locations, and there were still many more adventures I had hoped to share with her over the course of our 40 years together. I often told her that if I ever ceased making her laugh, she should consider leaving. Little did I know that the soundtrack of our lives had already come to an abrupt end. Am I over her? No, not at all. Do I want her back? The answer is no. She has turned into someone who lies habitually, even about trivial matters. I suspect she honed this skill during the course of her 6-year affair. Just last night, she entered the home we shared for 22 years and barely seemed to notice that all our cherished items, photos, books, plants, and 2 sofas, were no longer there. Her detachment from these possessions and the memories they hold is unsettling. Does she not reminisce about the intimate moments we shared on those sofas? Does she not recall the laughter that filled our home during gatherings with friends and family around the dining table? I find myself questioning whether any of it holds meaning for her, or worse, if she even cares. The petition regarding the value of her business states that we are both entitled to 50% of her 50%, which currently has no value. She and her business partner are relying on an SBA loan or grant to keep their venture afloat until the fall. For the first time, she openly expressed feeling fatigued from work, a sign that perhaps the strain of it all is beginning to take its toll on her. The competition for customers in my business has been difficult, and it has added to the strain in my personal life. Over the years, I cultivated a strong relationship with my mother-in-law. We shared countless moments filled with joy and laughter, participating in activities such as playing tennis, running 10K races, singing our hearts out, and having lively political discussions. Those times were truly special, and we always found a way to enjoy each other's company. However, as she approaches her 90th birthday, her mental health is rapidly declining. Simple tasks have become increasingly challenging for her. She can no longer read or watch television for even a few minutes without losing focus. Her overall health is deteriorating, and she has become completely unaware of the significant changes occurring around her. She is oblivious to my impending divorce, and has even lost her sense of time, mistakenly believing that I spent Christmas in France. It has been 5 years since my last visit there, a fact lost on her in the haze of her illness. As I prepare to start anew in early May, the thought of moving out weighs heavily on me. This move represents a chance to leave behind the trauma and pain that have enveloped the last 4 months of my life. Despite this, I can't shake the feeling that since last Monday, she has been acting as if she bears no responsibility for our situation. It seems she is conveying to others that she has found happiness, and that there was nothing she could have done to prevent our current circumstances. Ironically, if I were the one who had engaged in infidelity, I would likely be portrayed as the villain, the lowest of the low. 2 weeks ago, she returned home for a brief moment. The night before her departure, we shared one last drink together in our home. I took the opportunity to ask her 4 crucial questions. I maintained my composure throughout, ensuring my tone was steady and non-intrusive. Yet, her responses were predictable. She denied everything. No, she did not go on hikes to use her phone. No, she did not disappear to Strand Hill to make phone calls. She claimed her trip to Martinique was not premeditated, but rather a spontaneous decision. As for scheduling her trip to France for 2.5 months, she insisted it was only at her sister's urging. Though I told her I believed her, a part of me was unconvinced, and I began to realize just how adept she had become at lying without any hint of remorse. Before the reality of our situation struck, I had never witnessed her ability to fabricate stories with such ease. She had given me the excuse that her infidelity just happened, but I confronted her, stating that it was a weak excuse. She made choices and pursued a path that led us here, and while the divorce is on the cusp of being finalized, I find myself moving to Las Vegas in 2 weeks. There, I will settle into a beautifully renovated home located in an appealing neighborhood, yet I still grapple with feelings of misery. Although the divorce is not finalized, California requires a minimum waiting period of 6 months. Our official separation date was February 25th. I recently moved into my new, smaller house, and during my first outing on the golf course, I met 2 friendly individuals who invited me to play again. One of them is married to a French woman, and we enjoy conversing in French, his proficiency being about 90%. He has a good sense of humor and is also a decent golfer. It's nice to bask in the warm weather that, while not scorching, is a welcome change. I've had several encounters with my soon-to-be ex regarding our lease house in Los Angeles and other administrative issues, but our interactions have been limited. I miss the days when we would exchange jokes, anecdotes, and stories with ease. It brings a profound sadness to realize that part of my life is now permanently lost. The divorce proceedings are progressing at a sluggish pace. My lawyer sent the dissolution stipulation for my review last week, and everything seems straightforward on the surface. While we do still communicate, albeit sporadically, it primarily revolves around administrative and business matters. When we met in person back in March, she offered no explanation for her actions, which isn't surprising given her current behavior. I've noticed a new tactic she employs when faced with difficult questions: she simply ignores them. If a text message seems to ruffle her feathers, she sets it aside and pretends it doesn't exist. Her aversion to confrontation extends to her interactions with her sister as well. This evasive behavior is especially puzzling considering her background in business, where clarity and communication are key. We should see the divorce finalized within the next 3 months, but I continue to feel overwhelmed with sadness, anger, and a deep sense of loneliness. The betrayal cuts deeply, as I grapple to understand how she managed to lie to me for more than 6 years, sending messages filled with love while simultaneously carrying on affairs with multiple men. Our separation was exacerbated by COVID, making travel impossible. However, her infidelity began 4 months even before that, leaving me heartbroken as I try to navigate this new chapter in my life. She was already deeply entrenched in her deception, and there was something almost ironic about it. We had established a joint bank account for practical reasons, agreeing that both of us could use it for our everyday expenses. However, the understanding was clear: if either of us needed to utilize the account for an unexpected or significant expense, we had to inform the other beforehand. This arrangement had worked smoothly for quite a while, but it appeared that guilt had taken hold of her. She couldn't bring herself to spend money on her affair partner knowing that I would see the transaction updates. Now, my soon-to-be ex-wife primarily lives in France. Her days are spent caring for her mother, and her evenings are reserved for her affair partner. Just yesterday, she flew in to meet with her business partner and to visit our son. Back in early February, I mentioned that I was looking at houses in Las Vegas. It's likely that our son informed her that I had actually bought one, which prompted her to express interest in seeing it. I hesitated at first, contemplating whether it was wise to let her come by, but after discussing it with others, I was convinced that it would be okay. So, I went ahead and canceled the SUV rental I had arranged through Enterprise. Although she doesn't stay with me, she is living in the adjacent condo that belongs to her mother and serves as a home for our son as well. Her mother had returned to France after her health began to decline, leaving my ex to handle the day-to-day, albeit with some complications in her personal life. At this point, I can't say for certain if she is still involved with her Algerian affair partner. It's a possibility, but I have my doubts. Last night, she returned home as expected. Before her flight, she had asked me to pick her up from the airport. I wasn't particularly eager to do it, but the tone of her voice suggested that something was bothering her or that she wasn't feeling well. Despite my reservations, I decided to maintain a civil relationship and agreed to pick her up from LAX. When I finally saw her face, it was clear that she looked unwell, which made me wonder if something had happened with her mother. I didn't ask, though. It didn't seem the right moment given the tension between us. Not even out of the parking lot before she dropped a bombshell. Her affair with the Algerian partner had come to an end. I held my reaction in check, not quite understanding why she chose to share this with me. Perhaps she was looking for someone to confide in, or maybe she needed comfort after the end of that relationship. Perhaps it was something to do with finances, given that her business had failed. Whatever her reasoning, I remained silent and didn't respond to her revelation. She continued talking, mentioning that her doctor ex-boyfriend had invited her to go hiking the next time she visits France. Knowing her as well as I do, I could see through her motives. The whirlwind affair with the young Algerian was over, and now she seemed to be attempting to draw me back into the fold by trying to provoke feelings of jealousy with the mention of the ski trip she was planning. She also asked if she could come by to see my new house in Vegas. I wasn't about to let her know the truth. I told her it wasn't ready yet. Telling her to simply go away didn't feel like an option. Doing so might risk her going back on her previous agreements. As it stands, I plan to keep the peace until our divorce is finalized, which should take around 6 months at a minimum, as required by California law. The reason for this delay is crucial. If she were to become upset with me during this period, she might seek to claim an additional 20% of my pension. While she is entitled to 50%, she had agreed to a settlement of 30% against her attorney's advice. That 30% translates to about $1,500 a month for life, a considerable amount that impacts my financial situation significantly. Both of us have legal representation, and our attorneys are navigating the necessary legal procedures. The divorce petition has been prepared and is currently in the processing stage.